Holla ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher, and we finally had the big Q&A delayed, pushed back while they got some messages out and tried to clear things up so they weren't going to be bombarded as badly, I assume was the message. And then the Q&A has finally landed. Mr. Ion. Oh yes, Mr. Ion, lead game designer, the big cheese, the man in charge. It was overall pretty good. They did hit some of the hard-hitting subjects. It was unavoidable, I think, at this point, not to be smashed in the face by certain things, and they dealt with it kind of well. Honestly, I think they did pretty damn good, although some of the messages still remained unclear. They did touch on most things people were really concerned about and kind of took the blame and said, yeah, we fucked this up. And that's a fair deal. It's a fair deal for them to sit down and say, yeah, we know, we screwed this up. We're sorry, this is what we did. It wasn't good enough. It's not what you expect of Blizz. And yeah, we're going to work on it again because maybe we got a little bit lazy and a little bit not underhand, but a little bit complacent. And I think that is the story of WoD, is a bit of complacency came in there. They've survived so many potential WoW killers and all that kind of stuff, and maybe focus was shifting elsewhere with the release of Overwatch and the Diablo 3 expansion. When Diablo 3 didn't go down well, so they had people doing stuff all over there. Whatever the case may be, it was good to see that. So, without further ado, there are obviously going to be some things that I skip over because, frankly, they were limited importance, selfie cameras and whatever. I mean, that's just little extras that don't really affect the game in many ways. So, I'm going to skip them. Simple as that. Right, flying! Well, this message was so unclear still. And this was the only section, and I think it was the biggest section they had to cover, where I would have really hoped, at one point, after watching the interview, rereading the notes, and watching it again, that they said, look, we fucked it up. We fucked it up, which is the only thing they needed to say, because they kind of started out saying, well, you know, flying was on the cards. That was kind of their opening gambit, is like, yeah, flying was always going to come. That kind of message was flying out. And then people went, no, don't give us that. It obviously wasn't, which is great to see. Unfortunately, I had to actually skip being there, which kind of sucks. But still, it was great to see that people were just, no. Don't try and con us off saying flying was on the cards, because it obviously was not. And we had the interviews to back that up and the statements you made, which obviously indicated that. And then they backtracked it very quickly, saying, okay, yeah, look, we didn't have flying intended at all. No, we didn't. I'll be honest with you. No, we didn't. So I don't know why they tried to kind of go with that. Maybe that was the message they stated, and the chat obviously denied. So it was good to see that they changed it back and said it was a hard decision. And yeah, we're not going to lie. The majority, the absolute majority. And when I hear the word majority, that kind of indicates to me that's like pretty much everybody in the team was no flying. We can make this work. But they didn't. And they never addressed that. They didn't show that no flying could be a wonderful thing, which I think is the hard thing to explain to a lot of people who especially those who started the game with flying already in, is to say, look, there was a time when flying wasn't the game, wasn't available, and it was okay, and it was fine, and lots of things happened from that. If you try and tell that to somebody who's always had flying, they can't possibly believe you because they have no context for that discussion. They can't possibly understand it other than take your word for it. So it's just a little bit sad that didn't happen. It was cool. They said it was a hard decision, and they didn't really say it was because the community was just in absolute outrage and that flying wouldn't matter now, which it doesn't. I saw a lot of people comment in the flying threat video I did recently. It's like, well, you won't use flying then. It's like, no, that's just fucking moronic. Absolutely moronic. And I don't hate flying, right? It's easy to go with that sort of childish stances. Oh, well, you must hate flying. No, I don't. I just know there are opportunities, because I've experienced them, where not having the option to fly is actually a really cool thing. And it does create very different a world environment. So I think that's very, very, very awesome. So they backtracked. They said it's like, yeah, we made the decision. It wasn't easy. We had to remedy it. So I think what the big message here is that they tried to skirt around is, we made the decision that we were going to allow you to fly, but we wanted to delay it because we need to fix a lot of stuff, assuming people are going to be flying, because this game wasn't designed with flying in mind. But we're trying to rush it. And that's the big message there. They're going to rush it. So whatever people will find with flying is no doubt going to be funny, because, yeah, they're having to rush out certain changes because flying exists. I think a big component of this is actually the Tanaan Jungle. You might recall the first look we did on Tanaan Jungle, which was pretty clear. My message there was, you need Aviana's Feather. Tanaan Jungle is extremely dense and geographically very impassable in certain areas, and This is important. There's a huge section of Tanaan which is actually closed because you have to complete various quests to do it. It's blocked by a shield. Now, I've no doubt that shield didn't really extend all the way into the heavens because they didn't expect people to be able to fly over it or whatever the case may be. So things like that will probably have to be changed. And it will take away from Tanaan Jungle. I think didn't address this in the previous flying video, is that flying will take away from the Tanaan Jungle. It's designed to be extremely dense and compact. Whether or not I haven't seen yet, and is certainly possible, is that flying, in fact, will be disabled in Tanaan. But I haven't seen a message on that, so if I'm missing that, my apologies, but I have yet to see it. The other thing that I thought was interesting is that they're saying this is how we're going to do it in the future. This kind of confirms, and really, really confirms what we said previously, is there's no way we're not going to have no flying again. And that opportunity has been missed. So there we can see the confirmation, really, is that this is the blueprint, this is how we're going to do it. Complete the stuff and you can probably have flying then, and that's fine and dandy. But I would imagine that is a fair compromise. I think that's a good deal. If the blueprint is complete all the stuff we have in mind for you, which doesn't involve flying, go ahead and do that and show us you're doing the content, then you can have flying. I think that's a fair deal if they don't start throwing random stuff in there and they don't have particularly terrible content added to that, which is forcing players to do stuff which is awful. It's already hard enough with players who hate questing. There are lots of people who hate questing and hate having to ride up and down the hills and all that kind of stuff. I get that people don't like that, so it depends on how many different pancakes they decide to stack on there to say this is all the stuff you have to do before you can go flying. Do you have to complete every fucking battleground? Do you have to gain a win in them? Do you have to complete certain raid content? Do you have to... How much stuff will be added on? How much will be stripped away? I don't know. How annoying is the content going to be that might be a requirement for this? So that's something to bear in mind there. Reputations. They took this on the chin, but I don't see it as an excuse, honestly. I think it's one of the worst aspects of Warlords of Draenor. I'm not a huge Reputation fan. But the Warlords of Draenor reputation system is worse than we had in vanilla, and there is really no excuse from that. So what they said is that we weren't even going to have reputations in the game. That boggles my brain. Why would you exclude that? There are lots of people who, vice versa, love reputation grinding. They like stacking them all up. They like being exalted with everybody. They like being the cream of the crop in those people's eyes and the mobs and the new factions, and they enjoy that kind of stuff. So why would you say, well, we're not going to have reputations at all? That seems really strange. I also don't see that when I look at stuff that's obviously had more work done to it, like the Preservation Society. That seems to have been designed purely with that in mind, and that entire area of Nagrand is designed around that reputation. This isn't something that was added onto Apex's dailies. It's easy to see stuff like the Frostwolf was just added in at the last moment because it's basically tied to just the Apex's daily areas. So I was like, okay, we'll give them reputation gains for that. But the Preservation Society, not really. Not really. I think you designed that from the very beginning with reputation in mind. And I can't see any other way of that content existing in the first place, considering how large it is and how varied it is and all the rares involved and the design structure of the entire zone. I'm pretty sure you did, but, you know, maybe I'm nitpicking a little bit, and certainly I don't know the truth behind that. It's just that the evidence seems to point the other way. 6.2 reputations are better. No, no, not really. Yeah, you've added some questions there. Maybe that's all we can expect. But, yeah, I mean, technically, I suppose they're better, but they're not much different, if we're being honest. Killing rare mobs gives reputations. You can do quests and blah, 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 blah. There's a weekly and daily quests you can do. Yeah, but I've been down there doing them, and they're basically the Timeless Isle. But people were happy with the Timeless Isle. I was one of those people who wasn't. I didn't think the Timeless Isle was very well put together at all. But there are lots of people who enjoyed the Timeless Isle and spent lots and lots of hours there. So that's just a subjective opinion, I guess. Yeah, it is better. I suppose it is better than just grinding mobs. Certainly is better than that. So yeah, technically I do have to agree with you on that. Just to point out that we've made some... It comes across... Right, this is the thing. It comes across like we fucking sussed it in Tanaan, man. This shit is crazy in Tanaan Jungle. I mean, that's probably a little exaggerated, but it kind of seems that way, and it's not. It's really not. Something needs to be done, because reputations can be an absolutely amazing piece of content. They can be. We've seen that in the past. The Skyguard, the Ograla, the fucking Netherwing, all that stuff was great. optional content. Had no requirement to go and do it whatsoever. Wasn't linked to legendaries, wasn't linked to raid items or anything like that. Even the Firelands stuff, right? Firelands was really cool. It had a really good trinket, which arguably a lot of people had to get, including me. I had to go and get my trinket on my Warlock when I transferred over to Method, but fucking hell, man. It was way better than what we got in WoD. There was really no excuse for the WoD reputation system, and the fact that it existed it would have been better to remove it. I think that's the message we could take away. It would have been better if you just didn't have it, right? Because the way you did it was so bad. So bad. Quests. Yeah, Apexes fucking suck. But, I get it. Yeah, we fucked up with Apexes dailies, right? We had a good idea for content. Yes, you did. I would argue that the pit was actually pretty cool, and I said this early on in WoD. You had lots of options of ways to do the pit. Riding the minecarts, firing the bombs, firing the cannons, all that kind of stuff was pretty okay. That was alright. That was fun stuff that you could do with friends. Had no issue with that. That was pretty cool. Unfortunately, that didn't reflect into any other of the Apexes areas, like the Alkendown ones, or the really awful one, which is the Arakoa. I want to say the Arakoa one down in Spires of Arak, where I skipped that anytime it was up and rather do the single player one even when I needed Apexes for my legendary. That was just disgustingly bad. But we could just say that was an idea that went wrong. That's okay. But there was certainly some opportunity there to put some good content in. Unfortunately, the Apexes Daily was the bad way of doing it, right? And there's no argument from anybody on that. The Apexes Daily and the farming of Apexes crystals, these mystery crystals which turn into all sorts of stuff, was not great by any means. In fact, it was horrendous, let's admit it. And that's fine. Blizzard, fair enough, said that as well. The Mists of Pandaria Daily Quest felt quite structured and narrow. I think this is one of those things where they took the wrong message away from something that could have been good. There was actually nothing wrong with the Mists of Pandaria dailies. Right, now bear with me before you go mental. The actual dailies and stuff were fine. The problem was they were the only content. Okay, similar to Apexes, one, they were the only content that was at top end because 5-mans made no sense, and soon after you capped, the only thing you could do was raid. And if you're an LFR or non-raider, right, if you're one of those guys, there was nothing for you to do Mists of Pandaria besides dailies. So that was like forced content, essentially. Otherwise, why play the game? It's as simple as that. As well as that, the link to the legendary quest chain is that you force that into the daily quest areas. The dailies themselves, the Shadow Pan, all that kind of stuff, the Klaxi, was actually fine, and some of them were a lot of fun. You got the bombing runs down in the Klaxi, you got all the extra ninja stuff and the stealth stuff that went on with the Shadow Pan. I'm probably going to get those names wrong. And the Lore Master stuff, all that kind of stuff that went on there. They were quite good. They were quite good, and I can say that as somebody who went and did them at the end of the expansion out of choice, because I hadn't experienced that content. I went and did it. Plenty of cutscenes, plenty of side stuff, plenty of unlockable areas. Everything you want from a reputation grind is that there was progress, you grew, the zone expanded, the same sort of thing we saw since Trial of the Crusader, for any of the guys who did the content there. It was actually really well done, and had links to good story, good lore, and interesting quests at the same time. So I don't think they were too structured. I think the mistake you made there was actually just making them mandatory, or not mandatory really, but the only content to be done. We had a big joke about it in Mists of Pandaria. It's like it was the only daily that mattered because everybody was doing dailies and nobody wanted to do them, but there was no other choice, which was the sad part about it. So I would love to see a Mists of Pandaria style daily areas return, because they had entire zones dedicated to doing stuff in and around, which meant going to those zones and doing stuff around them was really good. I just think you can't tie this stuff to being required. You can't do that. You can't tie it to being required. It should be a choice. If I want to go and get my Shadow Pan tabards or whatever, or I want to go and experience this content, fine, I can go down and do that. And oh, look, there's a shitload of content for me there, but it's not forced. Instead of a quest telling you to destroy cannons like in Mist, you're sent to an area and can do whatever you want. I think the idea there is a little bit fantastical. If we're being honest, suppose we go and do a Apexes daily, right? Most of the people listening to this have probably done them. Yeah, there are multiple ways of doing it. You generally just do everything that's in your area, though. It's not really a choice of, well, I'm going to... I mean, this indicates that maybe you've got the choice to go down there and be like, okay, I'm going to do this daily today by just clicking boxes and collecting stuff. I'm going to do this daily today by just doing rares. That just doesn't happen. You go down and you do all the things there. And that's okay. There's a variety of things there. I'm clicking boxes, and it keeps constantly growing and growing and growing to fill the mystery bar, the wonderful, wonderful mystery bar of completion. And that's pretty damn good. That's okay. I like having multiple choices. I like if I'm missing 1%, there are crates and stuff I can click. I like the chance that there's a rare that pops up that needs a few people to kill, and we'll get extra benefits and rewards for doing that. That's wonderful. I'm never going to disagree with that. I think that's pretty cool. But a combination of both is really the best way to go, in my opinion. Really nice. The rewards for Apexis were also bad, and most of the rewards weren't really useful for players or cost too much, so players didn't do them. The Tanaan Daily Quests 6.2 are better. They have more structure and better rewards for Apexis crystals. They still cost way too much, though. We addressed this in the Tanaan 6.2 final video. 20,000 Apexis crystals is too much. It's too much. Yes, it's a decent set of gear, but it's only slightly better than Mythic 5-mans, okay? It's not mega gear. It could be 10 or even 15,000 to feel less like a grind. The Daily Apexis in Tanaan gives 2,000, so that's like 10 days worth of Apexis. Plus, you can, of course, farm them by getting the little fucking letters or envelopes from your garrisons if you chose to do that, to go and get an extra 1,600 or 800 or however many you wanted to do, as they are spammable to get gear if you were so masochistic to go and want to do that. But you can. 20,000 still seems pretty expensive to me. The gear is better, though. It's a high-level set of gear, which starts with the super basic stuff. So I would say it's better. I'd just rather see Apexis crystals removed entirely. It's just this generic, pointless reward, which is just the butt of all jokes. I think anytime you have this one reward, like universally, that's just like a thing, a resource that you're constantly acquiring, don't really get why it exists, but it's just like this random... It's the same problem we had with the badges. Like, these badges just didn't make sense. Who's awarding us these badges? Why are we just getting these badges? And why do these people want our badges in order to get gear? It doesn't make sense. There's a better reward system out there, as we've seen in the past. But still, I still think the Apexis is too expensive for gear. It's not something I would look at it and say, well, to get all my gear, I need like 160,000 Apexis crystals or something. Yeah, I know. That's not for me. It's not something I'm willing to put into a character. I'd rather try and get in some sort of looking for dungeon or pre-made group to get some far better gear much quicker. But there you go. The Garrison stuff. I mean, they touched on Garrison. How could they not? How could they not? There was not many admissions of guilt here. And in fact, they just want to nerf Garrisons, which is so the wrong way to go. With the Garrisons, it's like in 6.2 the team is looking to have diminishing returns on an account-wide level for missions that reward gold. It's a nerf, but alleviates some of the pressure to have many alts. I don't think nerfing Garrisons is the idea, but having said that, I mean, I did the video I did on the suggestions to make the Garrisons better, which was sort of universally agreed on as good ideas, which was cool, by the way. Thank you for that. I don't think that can possibly enter the game at this point. We can't just take away the profession buildings and make everything aesthetically pleasing. It can't be done. I think I would like to have actually seen the naval thing not be included, but I understand it's a huge piece of content they've created. Garrisons giving you loot from the next highest rated didn't work out well. While some guilds finished normal and went to clear heroic, that already had a good number of heroic items that didn't need much loot. Yeah, you did. I mean, there's no denying it. I mean, the simplest solution to that was obvious from the start, is you can only get cachets from bosses that you have killed. That makes total sense, is that you have an extra chance because you've killed that boss and it didn't drop anything you need, is that you have a chance in the cache to get it. That makes total sense. Being able to acquire loot from including the last boss of the game while you're nowhere near killing it just makes absolutely no sense, and it's just total bullshit on all levels. So they're just probably going to nerf it. I imagine the Garrisons at this point are just going to be nerfed. Just going to be nerfed. And that's it. And they admitted a lot of the mistakes, is that, you know, having the daily cooldown on professions didn't feel like you were actually taking part in profession. It doesn't. It's just something to log in and click on. You won't bring your buildings to Azeroth. The core gameplay of building a base, having followers and other ideas would be nice to bring forward, but it won't take the same form as the Garrison we have now. So hopefully they're taking some of the suggestions that myself and many other members of the community have made, is that you could have this permanent base. That is fine if it's purely aesthetic and purely cosmetic and something that you can actually invest some time into, purely for your own sense of satisfaction. I think that's the way to go. Instead of making it something that's required or something you have to visit and do things in, it's something that you can choose to do things in. But you can also choose to explore a great deal of content there and have a lot of fun. The guilds and raiding, it was a nice clarification for a lot of people. It's a message I've been pushing for a while, is we had an issue with the initial release of Blackrock Foundry. Yes, we did. That crushed many guilds, as it was a step up from High Mall, certainly into the Mythic levels. But they've tried to, and I really wish they had pushed this point forward, because I've had this argument on Twitter, via email, constantly, with people who are like, we want Mythic 10-man. And I'm like, no, you don't. You really don't, and it's because of class balance. You can't make great encounters if you're balancing around the idea it might only be 10 people, which doesn't even represent every class in the game, let alone every option of spec that's in the game. The balancing in there has to be complete garbage, in a sense, at the Mythic level to make that work. And someone say, well, 10-man Heroic worked out. In many cases, it didn't. They were just all over the place in terms of balance between that and 25. In 10-man, there was all kinds of issues, and this is because of class balance. You have to assume certain things are available. And all I can say to you, for those of you who've done it or heard me talk about it, is fights like Mythic Blast Furnace could not exist in a Mythic 10-man environment. They would have to lose abilities. There is no other way possible for that encounter to exist, because there's just so much options of things to be done there that need a variety of different classes. Even if you're limited to, say, 5 interrupters, you're barely going to get away with it, right? And that's 5 good interrupters being on the case. That's half your raid. You can't do that, as you need different people doing different things and putting out stuns and dispels, let alone including mind controls and purges and controlling and moving and all the kind of stuff involved with that fight. It just wouldn't exist. So to have great encounters, if we want to have great encounters, they need to know from the very beginning how many players are going to be fighting it. It's really important. The time walking in dungeons, I'm glad they're kind of easing off on what these things are supposed to be and just saying, look, guys, they're just for fun. When we covered the time walking dungeons, I tried to explain that I had no idea who this content was for. And honestly, I don't think Blizzard does either at this point. It seems to just be something fun, and we didn't make more 5-mans, so we've given you this. And it's really easy for us to do because it's just a scaling option. As many people have seen, legendary scale in the 5-man, so you'll get to use them in the time-walking dungeons and do all that kind of stuff, which is cool enough for people to want to go and check that out. That's fine. But God, I don't really know who this content is for. The gear is worse, as they said. They said people wouldn't run it. Right? People wouldn't do it if the gear was any worse or better and all this kind of stuff. People won't do it. I think it was for the nostalgia, it was, but it hasn't worked out that way. The game just doesn't work that way anymore. And they said that themselves. Like, look, if you're going here to expect to know what Shattered Hall's Heroic was like, that's not going to happen. Not even close. Not even close at all. Don't worry about it. It's just a bit of fun. We didn't make more 5-mans, but here you go. There's some options here to go and have a bit of fun with your friends if you want to. Right, so a couple of dodged bullets here, I think, especially over fight legs. Big complaint of mine early on. In the very beginning, even in High Mall, I was like, some of these fights are just outrageously long for what they do. And they kind of touched on it a little bit, but mistakes happen. I mean, not every fight was like that by any means. They did say Bracken Spore's endurance aspect was okay and didn't get boring. You fucking liar. You liar. Bracken Spore Mythic is boring as shit. It's so boring. So boring, because every single thing that needs to be managed in Bracken Spore Mythic, you are done and dusted by at least 50%. And after that, you're just repeating. And all that happens is the endurance aspect, if I was to use inverted quotation marks on this, is somebody might make a mistake at some point. And as the longer a fight goes on, yeah, there's more chance of a mistake a mistake occurring. But clearing areas where you're going to move to is something you do early on in the fight anyway, because you can move anywhere and you have the waves coming in and all that. So I totally disagree. Also, no mention here of things like Twin Ogron. They kind of mentioned that, it depends on the abilities and all that kind of stuff. And their message was, if the mechanics are the same over the entire fight, it shouldn't be longer than 5 or 6 minutes. Unless it's an endurance fight, which I'm not. I mean, if we're saying Bracken Spore's an endurance fight, I don't see that at all. I mean, my raiding experience speaks for itself. It's not an endurance fight in my eyes. And things like Twin Ogron. I mean, the only reason I bring up the Twin Ogron is they had a ludicrous amount of health. It was really boring, and there was only 2 combinations of abilities that could actually cause you danger in the Mythic level. You were only really in danger if things like Pulverize and I forget the name, so forgive me here, but the falling floor, the falling sky, or whatever. Where the raid had to move a lot, but also be gathered for Pulverize. And those are the kind of things that could only really cause you any sense of true danger in that fight. And because of the way the mechanics worked, the fight just went on forever until those things lined up again. And beyond that, it was just waiting for that to happen, because the mechanics on their own, or when they don't line up, don't do anything. So I would like to have seen that boss mentioned in some way, and certainly not fucking Bracken Spore, which was just a horrendously boring fight. Mythic Margok. I haven't had a chance to do this yet. A lot of my guild has, but Learning it was okay, but yeah, 15-minute long fights are... they're boring, especially when the last phase is one. The later phases are the more dangerous ones. Kael'thas Sunstrider should have been the learner for that one, because the initial phase is just so long. Pre-nerf was so very long and so very boring. It was unnecessary. The length of the Iron Maidens was about right. Oh, come on, come on! That fight would have been so much better if the jump to the ship happened way sooner. So you had 3 boat phases guaranteed. It would have been way more interesting. Oh my god, but that fight would have been better. If you rushed by... It's such a boring fight. Come on, Blizz. That fight is so fucking boring. Let's get it together. And I'm really sad that they said the length of Iron Maidens was about right, because all the challenge happens in the last 20% are on the boats, and you can skip a boat phase. So, raid itemization. This was interesting, wasn't it? They said this Blast Furnace thing again. A guild that finally kills Heroic Blast Furnace may DE almost everything from the boss, as they already have 685 gear in other slots. Will you stop mentioning bosses that drop tier items? Because it's just not true. I get what you're trying to say. I get the message. I get it. Just stop using that boss, because there's no way that happened. There's no way that happened. The one flat level for the entire zone and bosses that increase in difficulty as you get deeper into the zone, never happened. Kills later in the zone becomes less and less rewarding. Really don't get where this stance has come from. This is like a stance now. This is a message they're putting out there, that our bosses are always going to be more difficult the further you go into the dungeon. It's just not true. It's never been true. Never once has that ever happened. So why that is a stance, I don't know. I really don't know. I think that's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. The vast majority... They did touch on a point that I only touched on it on Twitter, because I thought a video on it might cause great outrage, is the item level difference of weapons. It's actually a ridiculously trivial difference. Something that gameplay would easily clear up, and probably class abilities would clear up anyway. And yeah, as they said, yeah, getting the mega mythic weapons from Archimon means you have it for farm. So that makes no fucking difference. It was why Thoradal, the legendary bow, was actually considered quite a joke, because... it was pointless. By the time you got it, you'd finished everything. So what was the point in having this thing? It was just like a luxury. Similar to Atiesh, great staff of the Guardian, is most people by the time they got it, it was pointless. It was useless. This is why legendaries were moved to earlier in the expansions regardless anyway. Or at least at the very beginning of the raid tier. It's why the cloaks and stuff were active pretty much immediately into Siege of Orgrimmar. It's because it's really no need in giving you this stuff after you finish the last raid tier off the last boss. It makes no difference. You've cleared everything anyway. Nobody gives a shit. At that point, you might as well give it to Waltz, which is why we saw things like Thoradal on their first kills of Kill Jaden going to rogues. Why? Because the bow just didn't fucking matter. It really didn't matter. So it might as well go to somebody who had the most points and did the most dedication. And so, yeah, it was nice to see them touch on that. I was really happy that they said, look, it makes no fucking difference. Really. And if you don't understand that, that's fine. But that is the case. So we can't change the numbers. That is how it happens. The classes thing, I've no doubt so many Warlocks. I mean, I checked the forums a little bit, and I sympathize with you guys so much. Out of everything that came out in here, the good and the bad, and there was, obviously, as I've said, there were some great things that came out of this Q&A. What they said about Demonology Warlocks was infuriating. Absolutely infuriating. And I'm completely on board with the Warlocks who were just... disgusted by this answer, because I can't think of anything more disgusting than this. So if you're not sure what happened, and imagine this being said about one of your specs, there are some concerns with how Demonology plays right now. You need add-ons to play it well because of how complex it is. It also was the best all-round spec, so Warlocks that wanted to play other specs had to go Demonology. It is still viable in 6.2, but won't be the best. The best spec changes over time, and it's Demonology's turn to be the worst Warlock spec for now. I think at that point, there's either a sign of frustration in his voice, honestly, when you watch it, there just looks to be a sort of rather grim admission, is that, yeah, we make things worse on purpose. And that's just absolutely diabolical. There is no excuse for this. There really is no excuse for this. You can't... I don't know how someone can sit there who's the lead game designer and say, yeah, we're going to make your spec the worst because that's how it is. Because we want people to try out Affliction. And no sense of balance there. All they needed to say is we want to try and balance it so people have a choice. That's all they needed to say, and not flat out say we're just going to make it the worst. And that's it. And it's like, it just felt like a sort of guilty admission. Is like, look, that's the way we're going, and it's just, it's sad. It's really sad, and I get it. Demonology will be significantly overhauled in a future patch. They're going to take a lot away from it. I think that's what you're going to say there, because they're saying it's too complex and it needs add-ons. Now, every spec in the game needs add-ons to play, and to play well. To their maximum potential anyway. And I fully agree with that. You need some form of add-ons to track certain things these days, especially with the RPPM culture that exists. Demonology was significantly overhauled. I'm kind of thinking they'll just go back to making Demon Form a cooldown. I'm kind of okay with that. That was when I was a main Demonology Warlock, is when it was a cooldown. It was fine. There was no big deal with it. It actually made it more cool. It made it more interesting than popping in and popping out. I think it lost a lot of flavor. I said that in the very early days of MOP, is when you could go in and go out and just kind of switch in and out of it. It took a lot of the fun away from becoming the demon. So I'd be happy to see something like that. Rotation, and then again, yeah, some things. I think there's a lot of stuff was things most people knew, especially with the ability prunes. Like some people lost too much, some people didn't lose too much. The choice to use Unleashed Weapon, though, I think a lot of good shamans will be a little bit sad to think about that Unleash might go, considering it gives a speed boost now. And a lot of people use it in that way, is that Unleash actually gives you an on-demand speed boost, which most shamans are actually really thankful to get. It's really helpful to have these little small cooldown on-demand speed bursts and use them to an efficient way. So maybe it was just a comment that came out randomly, but still it was one of those things. The rest of the stuff, the other thing I really like to point out is the team is proud of their leveling content in Draenor. They should absolutely be that way. Absolutely be that way. The final comment I have on this as a conclusion is that it wasn't touched on particularly is, okay, reputations were kind of tacked on at the end. The Apexis dailies were an idea that didn't work out. Where was the other content to go alongside this stuff? Or is this exactly what we were supposed to get? Because I want to know why there was so little extra content in the game. I think we need to answer that question other than just daily stuff. And that's a question that needs to be addressed. Is where did your time go? Because you obviously didn't spend any time on reputations, as you clearly admit. Was it mostly on garrisons? I think maybe I would have that as an acceptable answer, is to say, look, we spent most of our time sorting garrisons out and making sure the garrisons worked and the phasing, the technology behind it, and the design and what they were going to do, and blah, 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 blah. That's probably is the correct answer. I would just like to see them address that, because if you're saying, well, we didn't even bother with reputations, Apexis was our only idea for content once you, outside of raiding or PvPing, once you hit level cap, that's pretty sad. So I'd like to see an answer on that. But overall, great Q&A with positives and negatives that came out of it. Love to see your opinions as always. Thank you guys for listening. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.